It happened about a year ago, but the memory of that night at a small hotel still sends shivers down my spine. I honestly still feel sick recalling how long that man was there, and how completely unaware I was that he wasn't supposed to be. I still don't understand what he was trying to do. The hotel was tiny, only 3 floors with about 40 rooms total. It wasn't a busy spot. Usually on weeknights, we'd have maybe 10 or 15 rooms booked. My shift ran from 10:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m. It was typically quiet and uneventful, which suited me fine. I'd sit at the front desk, handle some paperwork, occasionally glance at the security cameras, or sometimes just watch videos on my phone when things were really slow. The lobby wasn't large, just the desk, a few couches with a TV on the side, and vending machines tucked in a corner. Behind the desk was a small office with a computer, a chair, and a glass window that allowed me to view the lobby while inside. At night, the main doors locked automatically, so guests had to buzz in, and I would press a button to unlock them. Usually nothing much happened after midnight, aside from an occasional late check-in. But one night, a man entered around 11:00 p.m., and everything about it still makes my stomach clench. He buzzed the door, and I let him in. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tall, somewhat thin, and wore jeans with a baseball cap, carrying a backpack. He approached the desk and inquired about a room for the night. I confirmed availability and gave him the price. He nodded, pulled out a card, and I swiped it. It went through, and I handed him a key card for room 2014 on the second floor. I distinctly remember him looking at me for a second too long before leaving. He had a blank expression, and his eyes lingered on me for what felt like 3 or 4 seconds after I gave him the key. Then he turned and headed towards the elevator. Nothing about it immediately screamed danger, but it was enough to make me notice him. Afterward, I settled back into my chair and played on my phone for a while. Around midnight, I looked up, and he was back in the lobby. He didn't come to the desk. He simply walked past me and sat down in the lounge area with the couches. The TV wasn't on, but he just sat there facing it. I figured he might be having trouble sleeping or something. Some guests do hang out in the lobby occasionally, so I didn't think much of it at first, but after half an hour, I realized he was literally just sitting there, doing nothing. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't reading, not even dozing off. He was simply staring straight ahead at the blank screen. At one point, I got up to get water from the vending machine. As I walked across the lobby, I felt him turn his head and watch me the entire way. I avoided looking directly at him, but I could sense his eyes on me until I was safely back behind the desk. It left me with a deeply unsettling feeling. Around 1:00 a.m., I was checking the reservation system on the computer out of boredom, when I noticed something strange. I pulled up the list of occupied rooms. In room 2, I muttered a confused question under my breath, and double-checked, because I had just checked this man in an hour earlier. I thought maybe I had made a mistake, so I looked at the check-in logs, and there was absolutely no record for him. No name, no charge, nothing. Then I went to the transaction screen to confirm his card had processed, and it showed no payments whatsoever. I remember feeling utterly bewildered, because I swore I swiped his card and heard the beep confirming it worked, yet the system had no trace of it. That's when I picked up the phone and dialed room 2. It rang about 10 times with no answer. Then I checked the keycard entry log, which records if a room's door was open that night, and it also showed nothing. No one had entered the room. That's when it hit me. He never even went to the room after I handed him the card. I glanced over at the lounge, and there he was, still sitting staring at the unlit TV. An awful feeling started to build in my chest. I sat there agonizing over what to do. Part of me considered a system glitch, but the lack of an entry log, and no charge, made it clear he wasn't actually checked in. I watched him for another 15 minutes. Around 1:30 a.m., I walked over and politely asked if everything was all right. He turned his head, looked at me with no expression, and simply said he couldn't sleep. Then he turned back to the TV. I nodded and retreated behind my desk, my hands visibly shaking. Around 2:00 a.m., I noticed he was no longer in the lounge. My stomach immediately dropped, because I couldn't see him anywhere in the lobby. I scanned the area and then spotted him standing at the end of the hallway near the bathrooms, half hidden in the shadows. He was completely still. I kept glancing up at him, pretending to be busy on the computer. He stood there for a while, then slowly walked back and sat in the lounge again, as if nothing had happened. I called my manager at home and explained the situation. She sounded sleepy and advised me to just keep an eye on him and call the police if he did anything overtly threatening. I remember hanging up and thinking that it already felt threatening, but I wasn't sure what else to do. After that, I checked the security cameras. I saw him on the first floor hallway camera. He had walked all the way down the hall, stopped at the end, stood there for several minutes, then walked back. Later he entered the stairwell and remained there for about 10 minutes. I have no idea what he was doing in there. Every time I looked up from the computer, he was somewhere else, near the vending machines, by the elevators, once just standing in a poorly lit corner of the lobby. He was always staring. By 3, I couldn't take it anymore, so I called the non-emergency police line and explained that there was a man in the hotel whom I didn't believe was a guest. They said they would send someone. While I waited, I noticed he moved again, this time closer to the desk. He stood maybe 15 feet away, just watching me. He didn't blink much, and he certainly didn't speak. He just stared, as if he had a problem with his gaze. I pretended to type on the computer, but I was so terrified I could barely breathe. Around 3:50 a.m., the buzzer sounded. I thought it might be the police, but it was just another guest returning late. I let him in quickly. The man turned his head and watched the guest walk past. I noticed his eyes followed the guest across the entire lobby. That scared me even more. It was as if he was studying it. A few minutes later, the man vanished again. I checked the cameras and saw him standing outside one of the guest room doors on the first floor. He was literally just standing there. That's when I dialed 9. I told them he was outside a guest's room, and I had no idea what he intended to do. They confirmed officers were en route. I kept my eyes glued to the camera feed. He just stood at the door for about 3 minutes, then slowly walked back to the lobby. When he returned, he approached the desk this time and leaned over the counter. He looked at me and asked if there was any His voice was so low, it was truly disturbing. I told him there were vending machines in the corner. He offered a small smile, then walked away. I just sat there, staring at the clock, silently begging the police to arrive. Finally, around 4:10 a.m., 2 officers showed up. I let them in and immediately pointed to him. He was back in the lounge, sitting down. They walked over and spoke to him for a few minutes. They asked for his ID and questioned him about things I couldn't hear. Then they escorted him out. One of the officers came back and explained that the man wasn't a guest at all. The credit card he gave me was stolen, and he had no luggage or reservation. He had just been pretending to gain access to the building. They charged him with trespassing and using a stolen car. After they left, I sat there shaking until my shift ended. Every time I looked at the cameras, I half expected to see him again. The part that truly messed me up was realizing he had been inside the hotel for hours, wandering around, standing outside guest rooms, and watching me from different vantage points. And he was never even supposed to be there. I have no idea what his plan was, but I know it wasn't good. That was the most terrifying night of my life. My name is Meredith. I'm 24 and I work the night shift at a tiny gas station off County Road 11. It's the kind of place most people only notice if they're completely lost or running on empty. I took the job because it was quiet and predictable. I liked that, or at least I used to. It started on a Thursday night around 1. The air outside was thick and still, and the persistent hum of the overhead lights had been grating on my nerves all shift. I was just about to heat up a cinnamon roll I didn't even really want when the door chimed. A man walked in, mid-40s, perhaps older. He wore a green coat, his hair was messy, and his lips looked dry, as if he hadn't smiled in years. Unlike most customers, he didn't browse the shelves for coffee or snacks. He simply stood by the counter, his gaze fixed on me with an unsettling familiarity. "Hi," I said, forcing a polite smile. Then the man spoke. "You always work this late?" I blinked. Yeah, mostly," I replied. He smiled. "I figured. I've passed through a few times, noticed it's always you. That unsettled me more than I let on. Oh yeah, right. Small town, I said, trying to brush it off. He didn't leave. Meredith, right? I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I was about to ask him how he knew, but he followed it by remarking on my nice handwriting, gesturing to the whiteboard where I'd written cinnamon coffee is back. Most people dot their I's, like circles. You use little slashes. It's very specific, thoughtful. I didn't respond. He didn't buy anything. He just stood there for another minute, watching me as if studying my reactions. Then he finally nodded. I'm Paul, he said. Just curious. That's all. And then he walked out into the fog. After that, he started showing up randomly. Not every night. Not enough to scream stalker out loud, but often enough that I stopped assuming it was a coincidence. Sometimes he'd come inside. Sometimes he'd just sit in his car near the edge of the lot, with his headlights off. One night, I tried to ignore him. He came in, bought a bottle of water, and lingered, as always. You're quieter tonight, he observed. Long shift, I muttered. He slowly scanned the store as if taking inventory. It must get lonely, just you out here in the dark. No one else for miles, he said. I'm fine, I replied. He leaned on the counter. You ever get scared being a woman alone at night? His voice wasn't threatening, and that's what made it worse. It was merely curious, neutral, like he was asking about the weather. I stepped back and asked, do you need anything else? He tilted his head. You always keep the door to the back room locked. Smart. I noticed you check it around 2 a.m. Almost every night. My stomach churned. I didn't answer. I'll let you get back to it, he said with a soft, almost apologetic smile. Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Then he walked out again. After that night, I started walking to my car with my keys between my fingers. I kept a tire iron under the counter. I changed the curtains in my apartment. Even started showering with the bathroom door locked, even when no one else was home. There were nights he didn't come. Sometimes I'd go a whole week without seeing him. But it didn't help. It actually made it worse because I never knew when he'd reappear. Like the time I came back from my 10-minute break to find a Polaroid on the counter. It was a close-up picture of me refilling the windshield washer fluid bin behind the station. Way too close. There was no note, but the slash dot on the eye and windshield on the bin label had been circled in red ink. The next time he came in, I told him to leave. I told him if he stayed I'd call the police. Paul just nodded. I get it. I've been too forward. You've been following me, I said, my voice cracking, and I hated that it did. I just think you're the kind of person who's used to being misunderstood. I thought maybe you'd appreciate someone who pays attention, he said. That's not paying attention. That's obsession, I replied. He didn't flinch. Would it be easier if I wore a smile and brought a soda every night? Would I be more normal if I just talked about sports and pretended I didn't notice the way your shoes are always a half size too big, or how your left eyelid twitches when you're tired? By this point I was already dialing 9. He didn't stop me. The police arrived quickly, and he didn't resist. He just stood there, arms at his sides, waiting. They searched his car and found a notepad filled with dates and times. It was my schedule, notes about my walks, my clothes, my groceries. One page simply had my name written over and over again, in tighter and tighter loops, until it became scribbles. He kept telling the cops the same thing. I just noticed things. I'm just a curious guy. The restraining order went through that week. Now I don't work nights anymore. I don't even live in the same town. The company transferred me to another station 2 hours away. But even now, when I drive home and see headlights behind me for too long, I feel the back of my neck tingle. And sometimes I still think about the way he said my name, like he already knew what it would sound like in his mouth, like he'd been practicing. I want to start by saying, as I write this, it happened just last night. I work the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station. I'm a 22-year-old woman, and I've been there just under 2 months. I work the weekend shifts, Thursday through Saturday, while another coworker, who I'll call Max, works Sunday through Wednesday. Max and a friend of his, who I'll call Ben, came into the station around 2:30 a.m. for coffee and to say hello. Max and Ben had taken magic mushrooms a couple of hours before, so when I saw them, they were all giggly and frankly pure entertainment for me. As we chatted about random things, Ben mentioned that there was a car parked in the lot, with its lights off, but running, with someone inside, and it had been there before they arrived. he said when he questioned the guy. The guy claimed he was waiting for a DoorDash order. Normally DoorDash drivers waiting in their cars while we prepared an order wasn't unusual. What was strange though was that I hadn't received an order in almost 2 hours. I spent most of the night cleaning in the back of the store, away from the registers and front doors, so I couldn't even see the parking lot. We initially shrugged it off, and the two guys went outside to smoke a cigar and play with Max's dog, who they'd brought along. At first I didn't think much of it, but once I was alone, it struck me as a little odd, especially since I didn't know how long that car had been out there before my coworker showed up. Fast forward about an hour, and they came back in for more coffee. It was then that Max told me more about how the car had been parked in a spot that even from the register I couldn't see due to a wall. He told me that during the entire hour they were out there playing with his dog and smoking in the parking lot. The man in the car had alternated between watching them and looking like he was texting someone on his phone. When Ben noticed this, in his extremely high state, he walked over to the car and asked, "What's up? Why are you looking at us?" At that point the man tried to pretend he didn't speak English. When that didn't work he switched to English, started saying he must have had the wrong address, and then sped out of the parking lot. Ben was definitely higher than Max at that point, but what made it truly creepy was Max's observation. The car looked brand new, and had no license plate. He also noticed a pile of blankets in the back, enough to hide someone, and when the man was confronted, another car had just pulled into the lot, with its lights off. This second car also looked brand new and had no license plate. As soon as the first car started driving away, the car that had just pulled in immediately followed them out. Max stayed another 15 minutes before they left, telling me to be careful and keep an eye out. Around 6 a.m., he came back in for more coffee and he was definitely sober, so we talked more about it. He said the guy was acting super suspicious the entire time they were out there, constantly checking his phone and watching them, along with the parking lot entrance and the store doors. Even he admitted he was freaked out, and once he sobered up, he wanted to check on me to make sure I was alright. We both concluded that had they not been there, this whole scenario could have gone several unsettling ways. I don't know if it was a pure coincidence, or if those two cars were planning to do something to me as soon as Max and Ben had left, and I was alone. I carry a knife for protection, but my gut tells me that, from what they described, if there were multiple people it might not have been any good, and if they hadn't been there, just playing like kids in the parking lot, something terrible just might have happened to me. I work again tonight, and I'll update if anything happens during my shift. I really wish I didn't have an update for you, but I do. The car came back again during my shift. Here's how it happened. It was about 3 a.m., and I was mopping the floors when 4 guys came in for coffee and snacks. I was ringing them up when one of them asked if I knew anything about the car at the far end of the parking lot, running with its lights off. I looked at the man and asked, "What car?" He then went on to describe what looked like a brand new Subaru, with no license plates, running, with what seemed like 2 guys arguing in the front seats. I could feel my heart drop into my stomach when he said this. I told the group that a car fitting that exact description had been sitting in the parking lot the night before, but there was only one guy in it. The one I assumed to be the leader of this group told me that as they were pumping gas, they noticed the car. It had been there when they pulled in and just sat there as they filled up their truck. He explained that as they walked to the door, passing the car, since their pump was farthest from the entrance, they could hear a guy not quite yelling, but talking pretty loud, and pointing towards the store doors. As they passed, one of the guys started to walk towards the car, to ask if everything was okay. When the guys in the car finally noticed them, they promptly put the car in reverse, and drove away. I told them I believed that was the same suspicious car from the night before that had left, panicked with another car following it when confronted. They seemed alarmed and offered to stay with me for a bit to ensure they didn't come back. I asked if they were sure, and when they told me it was no problem, they stayed for about 20 minutes before we all decided I was probably in the clear. I thanked them again, and let them top off their coffee for free before they left, and I was alone. Nothing else happened the rest of my shift, but I certainly kept a vigilant eye out when I eventually had to go outside to change the trash at the gas pumps. What's scariest to me is that I never once saw this car, but multiple people warned me about it. At first I hoped I was just paranoid and it was nothing, but to have the same car appear 2 nights in a row at almost the same time, and park in a spot invisible from the register,
or the front windows. Makes me wonder if my paranoia is justified. If it is, I'm just glad I had another group of people show up so I wasn't alone. If those guys in the car had decided to come in, thankfully, I don't work for the next few days, and I can only hope when I work again, the car doesn't show up. My name is Daniel. I'm 29, and I work the overnight shift at a small rural motel. It's not a chain, just a family-owned place, with 2 floors and maybe 25 rooms in total. I typically work from 10. The motel doesn't get much traffic at night. Maybe a couple of check-ins after midnight, if someone's just passing through, but most of the time it's dead quiet. That's why I took the job. I'm not really a people person, so sitting in an empty building most nights works for me. The setup is a main office, with the front desk, some chairs, a coffee machine, and a small rack of brochures. Behind the desk is a hallway that leads to a back office. That back office is almost like a lounge. It has another desk, a couch, a mini fridge, and a TV mounted on the wall. The convenient thing is a small speaker back there that dings whenever someone rings the bell at the front desk. So normally I just sit in the back, watch something on my laptop, maybe nap on the couch, and then when I hear the bell, I get up and walk to the front. I've worked there long enough to know the regular rhythm of the place. The building creaks sometimes, the heater makes a clicking noise, and the front door buzzes when a guest uses their keycard after hours. Those are all normal sounds. But the thing about working the night shift is that even the normal stuff can get under your skin if you think about it too much. And sometimes, the things that seem normal at first turn out not to be. This happened on a Tuesday night in the fall. It was cold outside, perhaps in the 40s, and the parking lot was empty, except for 4 or 5 cars belonging to guests. It was about 2 a.m. When I first heard the bell. I rose from the couch in the back and went into the main office. When I got there, no one was standing at the desk. The lobby was empty. I looked outside through the glass doors, but the road was dark and appeared empty as well. There were no cars pulling in, no headlights, nothing. I thought maybe I had imagined it, but the bell is loud and clear, so I knew I had. I stood there for a minute, waiting to see if anyone came in late, but no one did, so I returned to the lounge. I sat on the couch, pulled out my phone, and scrolled for a while. Not even 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. I jumped up and quickly walked into the main office, but once again it was empty. The hair on the back of my neck stood up this time. I went to the doors and stepped outside. The parking lot looked the same as before. The cars were all parked, with their lights off, and there was no movement anywhere. The road was completely empty too. I walked to the edge of the sidewalk and looked both ways, but there wasn't a single sign of life out there. I went back inside and sat behind the front desk. This time, instead of going to the back, I figured maybe some drunk person was messing with me, a ding-dong ditch of sorts. Perhaps a guest's kid thought it was funny. But after sitting there for 15 minutes with nothing happening, I started to relax again. I leaned back in the chair, opened my laptop, and figured it was just one of those weird things I'd laugh about later. Then the bell rang again. I snapped my head up so fast that it hurt. The lobby was still empty. Nobody in sight. My skin started to crawl. I stood up and walked around the front desk to make sure nobody was hiding, but there was no one. I checked the lobby bathrooms. I even stepped outside again. Nothing. I walked the lot a little, shining my phone flashlight, but it was just dead quiet. I went back inside, and that's when I decided to try something different. Instead of retreating to the lounge, I sat down in the chair right behind the front desk. If someone was sneaking around and ringing the bell just to mess with me, I wanted to be there to catch them. I dimmed the lobby lights a little, so the room was low lit, and I just sat there listening. It was so quiet that every little sound made me twitch. The clock ticking on the wall sounded louder than usual. The fridge in the back office clicked on and hummed. Every couple of minutes, the building creaked as it settled. I sat there with my arms crossed, staring intently at the bell on the counter. 15 minutes passed, then my eyes started to get heavy, and I thought maybe the person had given up. I even started thinking I'd just imagined the whole thing. Just as I was letting myself relax and doze off, it happened. The bell rang, only this time, I saw what was doing it. A pale hand emerged from beneath the front desk, stretching over the counter to deliberately press the bell right before my eyes. I jumped up so fast I'm sure the chair almost toppled over, and I bolted down the hall into the back office. I slammed the door and locked it. I stood there in the dark, my chest pounding, my mind raced, trying to figure out how someone could even be under there. The desk doesn't have much space underneath, but it's enough for someone to crouch if they squeezed in. That meant they'd been hiding just a few feet away from me. Wait, I forced myself to look at the security monitors. There were 4 cameras, one on the lobby, one on the hallway, and 2 on the parking lot. On the lobby feed, I saw the chair had apparently tipped over in my rush. The counter looked empty. Then in the bottom corner of the frame, I saw movement. A head poked out from behind the desk. I couldn't make out details, just the outline, and the glint of eyes, staring straight into the camera. I backed away from the monitor. I couldn't look at it. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I whispered to the dispatcher that someone had broken in and was hiding in the lobby. She told me to stay where I was, and that officers were on the way. While I was on the phone, I watched the monitor. The person's head disappeared, and then I saw the person crawl out from behind the desk, on hands and knees. He crawled to the door and then stood up. He was tall and wearing a hoodie, with the hood pulled tight, and his posture was hunched over. Then he turned around and started walking around the lobby as if searching for something, and then he turned and walked out of the camera frame, toward the hallway that led to the back office. I pressed my back against the locked door. A moment later the knob rattled, just once, a very slow rattle, and then nothing. The dispatcher kept asking if I was safe, but I couldn't even answer for a few seconds, because my throat felt like it was closing up. After what felt like forever, I heard slow footsteps moving away. I rushed back to the monitor. The man was pacing around the lobby again. At one point he stood in front of the glass doors and just stared outside as if waiting for someone. Then he walked over to the brochure rack and started flipping through the papers as if he were sarcastically killing time. Minutes dragged by. Finally, I saw flashing blue and red lights through the parking lot cameras. The police pulled up. 2 cars. The man must have seen it too, because he suddenly bolted out of frame. A second later, I heard the front doors open. When the officers cleared the building, they found a large rock near the front door that was presumably used to prop it open, but they didn't find him inside. He was gone. They searched the lot, checked the road, and the officer told me whoever it was must have slipped out as soon as they pulled up. I kept replaying it in my head afterward, the way that hand just came up from under the desk and pressed the bell, calm as anything. Now every time I hear that bell at night, I think of that night and that experience. I don't think I'll ever look at that desk the same way again.